3 weeks ago, I got a message from a kid named Jake. He's 23, graduated college, about to start law school this fall. He sent me his scholarship offer letter and asked me what I thought. The school was offering him $60,000 off his first year of tuition, conditional on maintaining a 3.0 GPA. He was excited, and nobody in his family has ever been to law school before. He's first gen. So I pulled up the school's 509 report. That's the disclosure document every ABA accredited law school in America has to publish every year. Took me just 4 minutes to read. Now, the scholarship retention rate at this school was under 40%, meaning more than 60% of first year students at this law school lose their scholarships by year two. The first time bar passage rate was 51.5%, second lowest in the country. And this past November, the school came off probation with the American Bar Association by 1 percentage point. The school was 1 percentage point away from losing its accreditation. So I wrote Jake back, told him what the 509 said, told him not to go. He decided to enroll anyway. Now, the school is Cooley Law School, the largest law school in the country by enrollment. And Jake is one of about 1,500 students they're enrolling this year. Now, I've spent the last several months reading every single 509 report in America for every ABA accredited law school. Every number, every year they tried to bury a trend. Now, I'm going to show you the 4 worst schools I found, starting with Jake's. And by the end of this, you're going to be able to read a 509 report yourself in under 10 minutes and spot exactly the same traps. Let's start with Cooley. Now, Cooley Law School is affiliated with Western Michigan University. They have 2 campuses, one in Lansing, Michigan, the other in Tampa Bay, Florida. They've got more enrolled law students than any other school in America. Now, the first number that matters on a 509 is the first time bar passage compared to the state average. Because if a school's graduates fail the bar at rates higher than the typical graduate in their state, the school is producing people who can't practice law, and the school knows it. Now, Cooley's first-time bar passage rate is 51.5%. That means of every 10 Cooley graduates who walk into the bar exam for the first time, fewer than 6 walk out licensed. The rest have got to pay out of pocket for bar prep again and retake it. Some pass eventually, some never pass, and all of them owe the loans either way. Now, the number that actually got Cooley into trouble with the ABA is the 2-year ultimate bar passage rate. That rate has to be at least 75% for a school to stay accredited. Cooley's most recent is 76.2. They are 1 point above the minimum to remain a law school. The class before that, 2022, came in at 57%. That's what triggered the probation. Now, imagine what this means for Jake. He borrows 6 figures to attend, he studies, he graduates, he sits for the bar, and it's basically a coin flip whether he passes. If he fails, he pays for bar prep again and retakes the bar. If he passes, he walks into a legal job market carrying the second worst bar reputation in the country, competing against graduates of Michigan, Wayne State, and every other school that didn't spend 5 years on the ABA's watch list. Now, Jake is signing his loan documents this summer. He's one of 1,500 this cycle alone, and Cooley is the most extreme case I found, but it's not the only one. Now, Cooley's numbers are extreme enough that the problem basically announces itself. California Western, on the other hand, is a bit more subtle, and that's what makes it more dangerous. California Western School of Law in downtown San Diego, on paper, looks like a regular private law school, nice building, respected faculty in certain specialties. It's a city most people would love to live in, but that service level legitimacy masks something much deeper. The tuition is $58,000 a year, factor in fees, housing, books, cost of living in San Diego, and 3 years you're pushing past $250,000. Now, their first-time bar passage rate is 62.9%. California state average is 77.5%. California Western underperforms its own state by 14.5 points. That is one of the worst state-adjusted gaps in the country. Their overall employment 10 months out is 76.9%. That's overall employment in any job, any kind. That ranks them 195th out of 196 ABA accredited law schools. Again, they are nearly at the bottom, nearly the worst, 195 out of 196. They're not sitting well in those rankings. Now, California Western markets itself as providing access to legal education for students who otherwise wouldn't get into an ABA school, and that framing might sound noble, but reality is they are admitting students who are statistically less likely to pass the bar, charge them $250,000, fail them on the bar 14 points below the state average, and graduate most of them into jobs that don't even require a JD. So that is really nothing more than an expensive trap. Now, a student who buys their pitch, borrows $250,000, has a 63% chance of passing the California bar and a real possibility of ending up in a non-legal job when it's over. Next up is Toro Law Center in central Islip, New York on Long Island, the only law school in Suffolk County. Their pitch is pretty simple. It's a law school in New York. That's the entire pitch. You're in the New York Metro. You can point to the New York legal market. And for a certain applicant, especially a first-gen law student whose family is proud they're going to a New York school, that pitch alone might be enough to get you to sign the paperwork. Their tuition is $61,000 a year, 3 years in total, including cost of living. You're north of $200,000. The median LSAT score of their incoming class is 153, at or below the range where bar passage starts looking pretty risky. Their first-time bar passage rate is 55.4%. The ABA weighted pass rate across New York that same year was 83%. So Toro underperforms the New York average by nearly 30 points. Of course, they're not going to mention that on the campus tour. New York is one of the most credential-sensitive legal markets in America. In other words, your law school pedigree follows you for your entire career, and the firms hiring Columbia and NYU and Fordham graduates as first years are not hiring Toro graduates as seventh years. There is a ceiling, and the numbers know there's a ceiling. The alumni know there's a ceiling, and you should know there's a ceiling before you sign the loans, not after. Now, people do succeed out of Toro. I've worked with some of these students, but a 509 doesn't tell you what the exceptional graduate pulls off. It tells you what happens to the typical graduate. The typical Toro graduate, by Toro's own disclosed numbers, is underwater before they even take the bar. And then there's Vermont Law and Graduate School in South Royalton, Vermont. Population 700. The law school is basically the town. I saved this one for last because they are weaponizing something good. Their pitch is environmental law. They've got a real respected environmental law program. They market hard to idealistic, mission-driven applicants who want to save the planet, litigate climate cases, work for the EPA, and that pitch pulls in a specific kind of student. The kind of student who doesn't grill admissions on numbers because the mission feels bigger than that, but I want to grill the numbers today. Their tuition is $55,000 a year. 3-year cost of attendance is past $200,000. The median GPA of the incoming class is 3.22. They are in the bottom quartile nationally. A lot of the students Vermont admits were told they could be environmental lawyers by a school that already knew from its own historical data exactly how that academic profile performs on the bar. Their first-time bar passage rate is 64.9%. Vermont state average is 76.5, so they are underperforming their own state average by 11.5 points. Percentage in a bar required employment at 10 months is 63.7%. They rank 185th in the country. The median debt of graduates who borrowed is $126,000, and 74% of graduates borrow. So the typical Vermont law student has a 3.0-ish GPA, loves the environment, here's the pitch, enrolls, borrows $126,000 at minimum, got a 64% chance of passing the bar. If they pass, 63% chance of landing in a job that actually requires the degree. And environmental law, even when you land in it, is one of the lowest paying legal specialties in the country. The entry-level salary does not service a $126,000 loan balance. Vermont doesn't tell you any of that, but of course, their own 509 data does. Now, if environmental law is genuinely what you want, and for some people it genuinely is, there are better options. Lewis and Clark, UCLA, Pace, NYU, and Vermont's own regional competitors all offer the same specialization with dramatically better outcomes. Now, Vermont does have a legit reputation in that niche, but it's not worth what they're charging you for the rest of the degree. So these are 4 different law schools, different sizes, different regions, different pitches, but underneath every single one, the same mechanism. A school with weak outcomes uses scholarship money and carefully tuned language to attract students who could have gotten better aid at schools with better outcomes. Those students enroll, and the grading curve is designed so a predictable percentage of them lose their scholarship by year 2. But by then, They're too far in to walk away without real financial damage. So they stay, they borrow more, they graduate, some pass the bar, fewer get legal jobs. And their tuition funds next year's recruitment cycle, which runs the same pitch on the next class. And the ABA is supposed to police this. The 509 disclosure requirement exists for exactly this reason, but the school figured out that mandatory disclosure doesn't matter if applicants don't read what's being disclosed, which is why I'm doing this. The 4 schools I showed you today are the worst I found, but they're not the last ones I'm going to cover. Everything you need to evaluate any ABA-accredited law school in America is in its 509 report. Go to the ABA required disclosure site, find the school, pull up their most recent 509 report. It'll take you 10 minutes. There are 4 numbers that matter for you in that report. The first is the first-time bar passage rate against the state average. If it's below the average, the school's graduates are less likely to become lawyers than the typical graduate in their state. The second number you want to look for is scholarship retention. If it's below 70%, your offer is probably a bait and switch. The third number you want to look at is bar required employment at 10 months. If it's below 70%, too many of their graduates are not working as lawyers. The fourth number you want to look at is the median debt against realistic starting salary for graduates of that school. If debt exceeds salary, the math doesn't work. You're going to feel it for the next decade of your life or more. It'll take you 10 minutes to look up those 4 numbers, and it'll help you avoid making a $250,000 mistake. And if you want my help navigating the numbers, getting a higher LSAT score, you could book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me. The link is below the video on YouTube, in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG as well. That is an open offer for everybody watching this now or later. Happy to meet with you personally, happy to help you talk through your situation. For those just joining, by the way, I do these lives every single weekday, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, here on YouTube, TikTok, IG, wherever you're watching this. If you find these helpful, please do spread the word. I see some questions here in the chat. I'll get to as many as I can. Feel free to keep dropping them in. Anything at all, LSAT and law school. Zaya asks, I got a 147 on a diagnostic I half-assed. What do you think, LOL? Okay, well, the good news is you did not terribly on a diagnostic that you half-assed. Imagine if you actually tried. So you might do 5 points better on a serious attempt, 10 points better, who's to say? Only way to find out. It'll take you 2.5 hours to take another practice test under more realistic, strictly timed conditions while you're not scrolling on your phone or watching TV or whatever. And that'll give you a better indication of where you stand. But whatever the outcome is, know that you can improve significantly from your starting point. I personally started off at a 152, ended up at a 175. Took me an entire year to get there, though. At least half of that was a total waste of time. If I had done it properly, I could have knocked it out in just a couple of months because the LSAT's all about pattern recognition. If you can spot the tricks and traps, you can avoid them. It all comes down to understanding how the test makers think and seeing it from their perspective. So take that cold diagnostic, take it seriously, but only use it as a benchmark from which to measure your later future progress. Cold diagnostics are often discouraging because they tell you what you already know, which is that you have not yet learned the language of the LSAT, but of course you can over time. The LSAT is kind of like learning a foreign language, unfamiliar at first, difficult to navigate at first, difficult to parse at first, but you can learn it, you can master it, and it doesn't even have to take that long. I mean, you could take the LSAT in August or September, roughly 4 months from now or so, and apply the second applications open in the fall. I recommend, if you're starting off now, aiming for August at the earliest, then maybe having September or October as a backup. You can apply beginning of the cycle, and the benefit of applying in the cycle is that when you apply earlier, it's easier to get in, and there's also more scholarship money available. Law school admissions operates on a rolling basis, meaning that law schools can evaluate your application in the order they receive it, and when you apply earlier, more seats available, more scholarship money available, better outcome. And if you want my help, of course, navigating the LSAT prep, planning out your study process, planning out your schedule, you could book the free LSAT tutoring with me, and I'm happy to talk you through your situation. B. Will says, I'm applying for next cycle. Cool, great. I mean, you're planning ahead, applying early. Love to see it. Again, for anybody starting off now, I think a good timeline is aim for August as your first take, September as your second take. You could go for October or November, but the later you apply, the harder it is to get in, less scholarship money available. Of course, you got to balance it out against the value of getting a higher score. It is better to apply a little bit later with a higher score than earlier with a lower score. But speaking now in late April, no reason not to just start studying now, go hard at it over the summer, take it in the fall. You could start a little bit light now if you're still in college, finishing up your semester. Or you could say to yourself, you know what, I'm just going to take 2 more weeks, wrap up the semester, focus on papers and finals and such, then switch gears, go hard at it over the summer. I would not worry about doing internships over the summer to look good for your resume, to look good for your application. Better to devote that time to just studying for the LSAT. A few more points on the LSAT will matter way more than internships and work experience. Now, if you are a freshman or a sophomore in college, I'd say focus on your GPA. No need to worry about the LSAT now, just maintaining good GPA. Make sure law school is what you truly want to do. The LSAT's not going anywhere. But if you're already a junior or a senior and you want to go straight to law school or maybe take only one gap year, I would say best time to start is now. Lucci is asking for reading comp tips. Well, how are you currently approaching reading comp? What are the gaps in your approach? I'm curious to know what you're currently doing, and then I can give you recommendations for how you might want to change it up. I mean, all else being equal, too many students spend way too much time highlighting, underlining, note-taking. It takes time to write things down, takes time to read things, and a lot of what you note ends up not even being useful for solving the question. So I find that all else being equal, be a little bit lighter on the note-taking, focus more on just understanding the main idea. What's the author's opinion? What's the primary purpose? If they could leave you with only one central idea, one key takeaway, what would that be and why? That's all you got to do. And keep in mind that the annotation tools, the software that LSAC uses on test day is kind of glitchy and unreliable. The highlighter, the underliner, the line spacing tools don't really work that well. So better to avoid being reliant upon them. If you want to take any notes, take them on your scratch paper, but leave it at that. Very, very minimal. And in terms of time allocation, you want to spend maybe 3 minutes reading the passage, the other 6 minutes or so solving the questions. For time benchmarks, you've got an average of 8 minutes and 45 seconds per passage because you've got 4 passages to solve in 35 minutes. So that's an average of 8:45. Part of that on the passage read, part on the questions. I would divvy it up again. 3 minutes on the passage, 5 minutes and 45 seconds on the questions, all else being equal as a general rule of thumb. Try Your Best asks thoughts on UCI law. I haven't looked into that one specifically. I'm guessing you mean UC Irvine. But again, I would look up their American Bar Association 509 report. Look up the stats. Look up their bar passage rate, jobs, employment outcomes requiring a JD, debt to income ratio. Get a general sense of what their outcomes are like relative to the state average. Then you'll have a sense of where they're competitive or not, whether they're worth going to or not. And keep in mind, of course, you have no shortage of options in California, plenty of schools you could choose from. Taylor says, bourgeoisie or not decides everything, LMAO, it's all about the money, dude. Okay, so I'm trying to see if I can extract something useful out of that. Yes, I would agree that it's all about the financial outcomes. Law school is a financial decision. It's a significant investment, and you want to make sure that you're going in with your eyes open in terms of, are you going to get a good return on the money that you're investing in your tuition in terms of the loans that you might or might not be taking out. In general, I'd say if you are paying out of pocket for law school, if you are taking out loans, you want to be especially cautious about what the typical outcomes are for one of their graduates. The law schools are desperate for cash. They need you more than you need them. And most law schools are dependent on tuition to maintain their operations. And so don't treat them as trusted stewards of your life savings. Treat them more like you're going to buy a used car where they want to sell you something and there's a lot of add-ons, a lot of extras, and you're not necessarily certain that they have your best interest in mind, right? So consider that it's a negotiation, and if you don't like the terms, you can walk away and go somewhere else. There's 196 American Bar Association accredited law schools, and some have better outcomes than others. So do your due diligence when navigating the admissions process and make good decisions. And again, if you want my help, I'm happy to talk you through navigating those 509 reports. Got a question here from Jordan asking, studied for about 3 months last year, diagnostic around 130, worked up to 150 on the last practice test, felt ready, walked into February, scored a 148, lost a whole application cycle over it. What went wrong on test day? So you said that your last practice test was a 150. You scored a 148. So to me, that sounds like you scored pretty close to what you could reasonably expect. 2 points is within the margin of error. The question is, I mean, what outcome would have really made it worth it for you? Sounds like you might have needed significantly higher than a 150. I'm doubting 2 points made the difference for you here. It's more about, can you raise your baseline significantly to get outcomes that are worth applying to law school with? Maybe you needed a 160 to make applying worthwhile. And so scoring a 148 or a 150 still wouldn't have been enough. Practice tests are often inflated. Students typically score 5 to 8 points higher on their practice than the actual, meaning they drop because of bad proctors or tech issues or nerves and anxiety. A lot of the folks who took the April LSAT experienced a ton of tech issues, and you want to raise your baseline so that you, even if you drop 5, 8 points, you're still ending up in a pretty good place. But if you need a 155 or a 160, you'd really want to have a 165 on your practice test going in. But one practice test alone does not establish a baseline. If you only scored on the high end once, that's just getting lucky. Can't expect it to happen again. You want to take the average of your most recent 5 practice tests, and that'll give you a better indication of where you truly stand and what you can reasonably expect going in for test day. But again, expect to drop a couple points. It's just normal. But I don't think that test day is where this went wrong for you. I'm sorry about the cycle, of course, and how it turned out for you, but I think this actually happened earlier. The problem was in your prep leading up to the test. More practice tests, scoring on the high end, scoring a couple points higher than where you need to be so that you are inoculated against a bad proctor or a tech issue. And you want to, of course, take those practice tests under real world simulated conditions. You don't want to cherry pick the best possible situation. You want to take 4 sections in one sitting. That's 2 practice tests back to back. You take a 10-minute break. You do 2 more sections back to back, and that's your test. So you can't take 4 different sections over the course of 4 consecutive days, add them up and call that a practice test. You also can't check your phone or take breaks in the middle of a section. The proctor's not going to let you do that on test day. Don't do it during your studying. And if you want to talk through what your retake prep could look like, you can book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me. The link to book that free tutoring lesson is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG. Again, unpluggedprep.com/start. Unknown says, hi, I'm back. I just took a diagnostic and I'm in the 140s. Is it possible to get in the 160s if my exam's in August? Is it enough time? So you want to improve from 140s to 160s in about 3.5 months. Yeah, that's plenty of time to improve 20 points. I mean, we've got to look at how you're studying, of course. I'm not saying it's going to happen overnight or that it's going to be easy, but 20 points in 3.5 months is definitely possible. The question is, what's your prep going to look like? Are you self-studying with books and practice tests? Are you taking a course? Are you getting coaching? Are you reviewing your mistakes in depth? Are you getting feedback on what you're getting wrong and why? The thing is that when you're studying on your own, you don't know what you don't know. But once we add that support into the mix, there's usually a pretty quick score boost, meaning there's going to be a lot of low-hanging fruit. And so if you want to talk through your study plan, you can book the free tutoring. Happy to talk through it with you. Right now, I self-study only drilling and practice test timed and untimed. Should I do more? Okay, so test day is not a drill. It's not enough to get the questions right when you're drilling. You got to get them right under test day conditions. So I would, as test day gets closer, I would transition from doing untimed drills or individual questions by type to doing more full-length practice tests under real-world timed conditions. And then on the days that you're not doing a full exam, you could do individual timed sections. And we could build out a study plan that accounts for that. Jerry's asking, do you prefer taking the test remotely or going to the test center? Definitely going to the test center to minimize the likelihood of experiencing tech issues. And for those who aren't aware, the June LSAT is the last LSAT where you can take it remotely or in person. Starting in August, it's back to in-person for nearly everybody with rare exceptions. For those who aren't aware, there was a lot of cheating going on with the remote LSAT. And so to mitigate or reduce the incidence of cheating, LSAC has discontinued the remote LSAT after June. Again, back to in-person for almost everybody, which I think is really a blessing in disguise, aside from eliminating the cheating, because the remote LSAT just had so many issues with tech and remote proctoring that I think when you take it in person, you reduce the likelihood of issues. Laurice is asking, why is your coworker always so cranky when he gives explanations? Not sure what you're talking about there. If you're talking about explanations that I'm doing on YouTube, the reading comp ones, those are me, and I don't think I'm being cranky, but you could feel free to disagree. I'm trying to be pretty straightforward and matter of fact. If you mean one of the instructors, definitely reach out. We could talk more about that, but we try to have a generally pretty positive attitude there. But feel free to email or DM or text, and we could talk through that more offline. Got a question here from Seven asking, do you think if I had a 148 diagnostic, I could get a mid 170? I'm hoping to take it in early 2027. So you've got nearly a year to improve 25 points or so. Yeah, you could make anything happen over the course of nearly a year. The question is, what's your study plan going to look like? How many hours can you put in per week? What study methodologies are you using? Are you taking a course? Are you getting coaching? Are you self-studying? Are you going to study 1 or 2 hours a week, or more like 5-10 hours a week? I don't think you have to study 20 hours a week over a year, of course. I think that even just slow and steady wins the race kind of approach could work pretty well here. If you want to talk through a longer term study plan, I'm happy to chat it with you about it. The link's in my bio to book the free tutoring with me. Now, I will say that the students who tend to do the best on the LSAT tend to give themselves longer runways. Doesn't happen overnight, takes time. Like anything worth doing, it doesn't happen overnight, requires some effort. But if you want to score in the top 3% or the top 1%, you got to study differently than the vast majority of students. But the path to get to the 170s is actually pretty simple. You do a set of practice tests, you understand them inside out, you take them, review your mistakes, review everything that you're having difficulty with, even if you get it right and you got lucky, but it could have gone the other way. That's certainly worth discussing and analyzing and reviewing. We use a framework called the Socratic review method in our courses and our coaching programs. The idea being that, of course, we're not going to be there on test day and we can't take it for you. So we've got to give you the confidence, the clarity, and the skill to perform when it truly matters. And so we ask you a series of guiding questions live in the coaching, and you can also adopt that same process for your own self-studying. For example, was it your approach to the question that was off, or was it the text of the question that threw you off? Was it a tempting wrong answer choice, or was it an unappealing right answer choice? Because if we can get down to the root cause of what you're getting wrong and why you're getting it wrong, then we can help you avoid making that same mistake again. And if you want to walk through this with me on a demo question, we can meet personally one-on-one and talk through it. Again, the link for the free tutoring is unpluggedprep.com/start. Link is below the video on YouTube, in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and Instagram as well. Open offer for anybody watching this now or later. And if you book through the link, you'll be able to see my real-time availability. It may have changed since I last checked, but I should have some openings available this week. Justin's asking, do you offer help with personal statements? Yes, we do, but we typically recommend focusing on the LSAT first and foremost until you have secured that score, because unless you've got the score, nothing else really matters. In other words, a great personal statement with a mediocre LSAT is not going to cut it. In contrast, if you have a great LSAT score, mediocre personal statement, you could still get in. In other words, the process is numbers driven. No reason to have anything be mediocre, of course, but first and foremost, let's secure the score and then and only then switch gears to the essays. See a follow-up asking, thoughts on attending schools that are awaiting accreditation, such as High Point? I think that you are taking a big gamble, a big risk, when you attend a school that has not yet gotten its accreditation. In other words, do you really want to be the guinea pig with your legal education with your financial future, with your career. You're spending your time, you're spending your money. There's no guarantee they will get accreditation, and of course, they're not going to have the same prestige or reputation as a school with a longer running track record. There are plenty of schools out there that have been open for decades, if not 100+ years, that are considered more established and will be more likely to get you a good outcome in terms of bar passage rates, in terms of getting you good employment outcomes. You typically get what you pay for, and the problem is that lower ranked schools and unaccredited schools aren't necessarily even that cheaper, yet they still have worse outcomes. Now, if you could get a full ride and pay nothing for tuition, that's a different story, of course. Maybe that changes the risk calculus a little bit there, but I would still tread very carefully. See a question. I've got a 156 LSAT with a 3.8 GPA. I'm stuck whether I should go this fall or try for a 160 plus. Go for the 160 plus. A 3.8 GPA is solid. Let's match that with a killer LSAT score. You're going to get way better outcomes, even just with 5 points more on your LSAT, to get a 161 and apply then versus applying with the current 156. No question in my mind here. You've already gotten the GPA secured. Just match it with a better LSAT score. Retake it in August or September. Apply as soon as applications open. If you're going this fall with your current numbers, I mean, I don't know if you've applied yet, but we're pretty late in this cycle already, past a lot of law school deadlines. If you already have the offer, of course, different story, but I would say retake. You could save yourself 6 figures by getting a higher LSAT and giving yourself just a few months more to study for the LSAT to retake. I see Forrest is asking, what LSAT would I need with a 3.6 GPA to get into a top 14 law school? You would want to have a 175 or higher on the LSAT. And I say that because the top 14 law schools have GPA medians of 3.9 or so, and LSAT medians of 170 to 174. And so a 3.6 GPA is 0.3 below the medians on the GPA front, so we want to balance that with a higher LSAT score to compensate. I see you followed that you've got 1 year of paralegal experience. That's good, sure. They like to see that, better to have it than not have it, but you still got to have the numbers. I see Cattle Heart saying, what are your thoughts about Texas removing the requirement of being accredited? So for those who aren't aware, there are a couple of states, namely Texas and Florida, that are establishing alternate pathways to accrediting law schools outside of the American Bar Association. This is one of those culture war things. They don't like what the ABA is doing with diversity, and so they want to say basically stick up their middle finger to the ABA and set up alternate pathways. The thing is that they have not yet actually set up what those pathways would be. It's more like an announcement and a headline and not a whole lot of actual substance following it yet. It would be interesting to see if they actually pursued this, but in the meantime, that leaves you without a clear path forward. And even if you did go to a law school that was not ABA accredited, but rather accredited by the state of Texas or by the state of Florida, that would limit the portability of your JD, meaning that you might be able to practice in Texas or Florida, but if you needed to move to a different state for whatever reason, your JD would not be portable. You wouldn't be able to get accepted to the bar in those other states. In other words, you're kind of stuck in your state, which could be okay, but life often takes us many unexpected places, right? And so if you want to relocate because of your spouse or a family member or something, somebody gets sick and you want to move, but you can't because your JD limits you to your current state, you're kind of out of luck. And so I would think the most prudent, the most practical, the safest course of action is go to an American Bar Association accredited law school, maintain the portability of your JD so that you can practice in many different states. You keep your options open. And the ABA, for whatever its faults may be, it still does exhibit or establish a degree of quality control. I mentioned earlier those 509 reports that give you useful stats on bar passage rates and employment outcomes. If you're going non-ABA, it might be a bit more of a black box in terms of what those outcomes typically are. Tim is asking, how much does the school you go to for undergrad matter for a T14 law school? Not very much. Law schools don't really have incentive to care about where you went to undergrad because they are not evaluated based on that metric, just like they don't really care what you majored in undergrad. They care mostly about your LSAT score and your GPA. Everything else is a soft factor, a distant third, less important by comparison. And so for that reason, if you really wanted to be smart financially and save some money on your higher education, you could go to a public state institution, pay in-state tuition for undergrad, pay very little for your college tuition, save some money in the bank, keep your options more open for law school. You could go to an Ivy League for undergrad, or you could go to a state school and get into the same law school regardless. It's a lot more important about what happens. What's more impactful, what matters more is what your GPA was and what your LSAT score is. That's what matters the most. So you might also want to choose a major where you can get a high GPA. I hate saying that because I wish that you could just pursue whatever you're interested in for your major in your college classes, but you will get punished if you take harder classes that are more brutally curved. There's plenty of grade inflation with undergraduate GPAs. Law schools are aware of that, and so you kind of got to just take advantage of that situation. I hate to say it, but it is the truth. If you want to get into a better law school, you want to have a higher GPA. Like I mentioned, the T14 law schools, the top 14, they have GPA medians of 3.9. 3.9, so nearly straight A's is what you got to have to make that metric on the GPA front. And of course, if your GPA is not what you would have liked it to be, if it's lower, I see we have a commenter saying they got a 3.5, then you got to have a higher LSAT score to compensate. Now, there are lower ranked law schools. Not everybody has to go to a T14, of course, but if you want to go to a lower ranked law school, you might want to get more scholarship money from that school to make it worth making that choice. So that means you still want to have high numbers anyway. See, somebody just signed up for a call with me. Awesome, looking forward to it. And by the way, folks, for anyone who hasn't yet booked that free tutoring call with me, the link to book the free tutoring is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and Instagram. No obligation, no strings attached. Free LSAT tutoring lesson with me. What we do during those calls, we look at where you're currently at with your LSAT prep, what your goal LSAT score is, when you're planning on taking the LSAT, and then we map out an action plan to get you from here to there over that time frame. If you're taking the LSAT in June, in about 6 or 7 weeks, we'll set up a more boot camp style approach with live coaching 6 or 7 days a week, pedal to the metal, max it out. If you're taking it in August or September, we can take more of a slow and steady approach, maybe 1 or 2 coaching sessions a week, help you make the most of your study time outside of school or work or family or whatever your other obligations are. We go over an LSAT question together, map out your plan of attack. Again, the link to book that free tutoring is unpluggedprep.com/start. Link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG as well. Casey is asking, thoughts on going to Northeastern University for $20,000 a year if I plan to go to law school? Well, what is your best alternative? I mean, $20,000 a year is a significant discount on tuition, meaning that you've probably gotten a lot of scholarship money, so congrats on that. The question is, what were your other options? Was there another school you could have gone to for a full ride? Were there other schools where they wanted you to pay sticker? I mean, it sounds like you've got a pretty decent deal there. The question is, what else could you have done instead? I typically recommend applying to a pretty wide range of law schools to maximize your options. So that could be, let's say, you apply to 15 law schools, which is not crazy, by the way, considering how competitive things have been. That could be you go to you apply to 5 safety schools, 5 target schools, 5 reach schools. 5 safeties would be schools where you are above the LSAT and GPA medians. Target means you're pretty much on point with the LSAT and GPA medians, and then reach means you're below on the LSAT and GPA medians, but hey, you could get lucky. You've got more offers, more scholarships you can use to negotiate and play the schools off each other. I see Justin's asking, with my 156, how possible would it be to improve that to a 163 or higher by August or September to get that application in early? I mean, you're looking for 7 points or more in 4 months or so. Very doable. I mean, we typically see students improving 5, 10 points in just a month or so. Not a promise or a guarantee, to be clear, your results may vary. Ultimately, your improvement is going to be a function of the amount that you study and the way in which you study. But with 4 months, that's plenty of time to improve 10, 15 points or more. Don't undersell yourself on how much you can achieve in the course of 4 months. The question is, how are we going to change your prep? How are we going to level it up? Or where are you leaving points on the table? Is there a certain LSAT question type giving you trouble? Is there a certain method of reasoning? Is there certain pacing or time management strategies we can adjust for you to help you maximize the number of questions you can solve within the time constraint? Does your practice test include taking enough full-length timed exams? Does your study plan involve taking enough full timed exams? And so there's a lot that we could do to help you level up the efficiency of your prep. And of course, it matters what else you've got going on if you're working or you're in school. But I would think for the typical student, 10 points or more in 4 months is very doable. And so we could discuss it more on the call. I see Chesky's asking, I'm taking a gap year and was wondering if I should go abroad for law school or will staying in the States be better? Well, that is a really big decision, what country you go to law school in, because different countries have different styles of law, for lack of a better word, different legal systems. You have the American system versus the British Commonwealth system, like that you'll encounter in the UK or India or Australia or even Canada, right? So very different practices of law. Common law is a whole different thing. And so where do you want to have your career? Where do you want to spend your life? It's a big decision, of course, but the country you go to law school in should ideally be the country that you practice and live in. Decide what you want to do based on that. I mean, if you're taking a gap year, you can use that gap year to intern at a law firm. You can use that gap year to study for the LSAT. And so you have some time to figure things out. It's not a decision that you have to make overnight. GT's asking, is law school, this is kind of related actually, GT's asking, is law school more worth it in Canada or the US? And we have a reply saying US. I mean, I would agree with that for the simple reason that the American economy is stronger. The American dollar is stronger. So going to law school in the US and working in the US is probably a more prudent financial decision. You can then send money back across the border to your family in Canada if you want to. But it depends where you want to spend your life and where you want to spend your career and where you want to live. There are some things that are more important than money, of course, like deciding what's going to make you happiest in terms of the country that you live in. But strictly on a dollars basis, the incomes and salaries are higher in the US, especially if you're looking to go into big law, like the big law firms in New York and DC, the white collar law firms. I mean, their starting salaries for first year associates could be $225,000 a year or more. I doubt that there are many firms in Canada paying the same, even for U of T graduates. And so something worth considering there. But whether you're going to law school in US or Canada, you do still take the LSAT typically. And so the application process is somewhat similar. I see a question from Maddie saying, planning for law school, but now considering becoming a cop for a few years to save and have more work experience, also to offset my poor undergraduate GPA. So yes, that is not a bad plan. The longer you've been out of undergrad, the less your undergraduate GPA matters, the more they're going to place value on your LSAT score, and your work experience will also take up a larger piece of the pie to offset the lower GPA. I would also take some of that time to study for the LSAT and get a higher score. If you're not in a rush, you have more time to do it right and keep studying. I don't think you need a few years to study for the LSAT, of course, but more time can only help. The LSAT is a skills-based test, not a test of memorization. And so having more time to study for the LSAT can only help. I see regular Apple Juice fan says, my real LSAT scores are 148, 150, 158, and 178. How do I frame this in an addendum? So you jumped up 20 points on your last LSAT from 158 to 178. Awesome, congrats. The truth is you don't need to write an addendum for this. The scores speak for themselves. Basically, what you were doing prior wasn't that effective. You changed something and your score skyrocketed. The schools have no incentive to care about the previous lower scores because they only have to report the highest score on record to the American Bar Association, which in turn is where US News pulls their data from for inclusion in the rankings. So at the end of the day, the 178 is the score. If you want to write an addendum, you can just be very matter of fact and say, I changed my approach, put in a lot more time, got more effective with my studying, and that led me to a higher score. Or maybe there were some previous tech issues or proctor issues on the previous takes, and then finally it went smoothly. I wouldn't worry that much about it. Ank says, what are good law schools for oil and gas? Or what's the path to take for that field? Well, I would expect that a lot of the good law schools for law related to oil and gas are going to be in Texas. And there are many such law schools available to you there. I would talk to admissions and see what they have to say. Ask them about the typical outcomes employment-wise for their graduates and see what kind of pipelines they have to firms in Houston or Dallas and such that practice in that area. Just scanning through for other questions that I may have missed here. I see a question from Gershon asking, I have a 3.5 GPA. What would I need to get on the LSAT to get into a law school just anywhere? Well, I don't want you to just aim to get in just anywhere, right? Because there are law schools that will take you with a 3.5 GPA and a 150 LSAT. The question is, are those law schools worth attending? The worst ranked law schools may accept you, but you're going to pay sticker price, and they typically have pretty poor bar passage rates and poor employment outcomes. And that's not worth the investment. The ROI is pretty sad. So I would say instead, you've got a 3.5 GPA. I'm assuming that you're done with college and really can't really raise that any further. But there is one area that you can improve your standing in, and that is the LSAT. So don't ask what is the minimum I could get away with getting on the LSAT. Ask instead, how can I maximize my LSAT score to offset a relatively subpar GPA? What would it take to get a 165, a 170, a 175 on the LSAT to rewrite the narrative to show law schools that my GPA does not reflect my true potential because my LSAT shows I'm capable of much more? And then say, okay, well, it might take more than 3 months to get the 175, and that's okay. Because giving it 4, 5, 6 months will be worth it, given that it could provide me with significantly better outcomes in terms of getting into better law schools and getting more scholarship money. Rubik says, did you just say a 3.5 is a relatively subpar GPA? I did, and I know that might have been offensive, and I apologize if so. I say that only because there is so much grade inflation that your competition will have significantly higher GPAs. I mean, the T14 law schools all have GPA medians of 3.9, and even schools in the top 30 still are looking at 3.7, 3.8 GPA medians. And so you've got to go pretty far down the rankings to find the schools where the 3.5 GPA is the median. And then consider that half the applicants who got accepted got above the median, and that also schools are always looking to raise their medians each year. So in other words, the 509 reports, the medians are a lagging indicator. They reflect last year's numbers. And so if you do have a 3.5 GPA, I would recommend that you get a significantly higher LSAT score to compensate. If you are below on the GPA median, you want to be above on the LSAT median to compensate. If you are below the 25th percentile GPA median on the GPA, you want to be above on the 75th percentile on the LSAT to compensate. So look at what law schools you want to attend, what law schools you want to get, you could reasonably get a full ride at based on a given LSAT target, and then aim to score that at that target. And there are people who are planning ahead, not doing it in 3 or 4 months. For example, I see a question from Des Liu asking, if I plan to apply fall 2028, when should I start studying for the LSAT? So this person's looking to apply 2.5 years from now, is on the live today. Awesome. I love that you're planning ahead. I wish that more folks were planning ahead like you are. If you want to apply fall 2028, you could aim to take the LSAT in June 2028 at the latest, with August 2028 as a backup. But keep in mind that LSAT scores are good for 5 years. So you could actually start studying for the LSAT much earlier. You could knock it out this fall if you wanted to. Not saying you need to, of course, but you could. I would probably start studying within the next year and knock out the LSAT maybe spring or summer of 2027. Just to give yourself a pretty long runway. That way you're not stressing, you're not rushing it, but you're also knocking out the LSAT early enough that you'll have multiple chances to retake if you need to. Not saying you will, but if you have a bad proctor or a tech issue or nerves or anxiety get the better of you, or you get sick one day, you want to have multiple at-bats just in case you need to. Got a question from Skate asking, I've got a 4.0 GPA. What's the LSAT score that I should shoot for? I've got a couple different answers on this one. The first answer is, why not just shoot for a 180? If you have a 4.0 GPA and a 180, you could get into many of the T14. No promises or guarantees, of course, but that would literally be maxing the numbers on both LSAT and GPA, get you some pretty incredible outcomes. You either get into T14s or you get full rides elsewhere. Well worth shooting for. But really, I mean, with a 4.0 GPA, if you can get anything above a 170, you'll have some pretty solid outcomes in admissions. But why not aim to max it out, right? I mean, I don't know when you're applying to law school, but even applying this fall, you've still got plenty of time to get a top score if you can devote your summer to this. And if you want to talk through what your LSAT prep plan could look like, you could book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me. Happy to talk it through with you. The link to book that free tutoring with me is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and Instagram as well. That is an open offer, by the way, for anybody watching this now or later. Happy to meet personally and talk you through your situation in terms of mapping out what your LSAT study schedule could look like to get you from wherever you're starting at up to your goal score, whether it's a 160, a 170, or a 180. Happy to talk it through with you. Make an action plan there. I see a follow-up saying, I want to shoot for a low-level law school with my 4.0. How high do I need to score to get in? Well, my first question is, why do you want to shoot for a low-level law school? Why not shoot for a high-level law school? And if you want to go for scholarship money over prestige, that's a perfectly fine outcome, but maybe you could get into a mid-tier law school with a full ride, or even a relatively higher tier law school with a full ride. But if scholarship money is important to you, of course, I understand that. And you can certainly get into some low-ranked law schools with a full ride, provided that you have the numbers to justify it. And so you're already good on the GPA with the 4.0. Let's just match that with a great LSAT score to maximize your outcomes. But the exact number you need is going to vary based on the law schools that you're targeting. I mean, if you're looking at a law school that's unranked, it'll require a lower score than a school that's ranked, say, 50. But we could discuss it on the call. Again, the link is unpluggedprep.com/start. For those just joining, by the way, I do these lives every single weekday, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, here on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, wherever you're watching this. If you find these helpful, please spread the word. The only way this grows is through word of mouth. I don't do any advertising for these lives, and the algorithm doesn't really boost them because they can't run ads during them. So I do appreciate your support, spreading the word, sharing it to your social, sharing it on your Facebook groups or Discords, subreddits, group chats. Please do share it. The more this grows, the more I'll expand it over time. I'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific. I'll see you all then. In the meantime, all the best. Take care. Thanks for joining.